At some point along your credit card journey, you're bound to run into the issue of not getting a high enough credit limit on one of the credit cards you're approved for. This, of course, is where the topic of credit limit increases comes into play. Whether you're somebody who needs a higher credit limit for a big purchase that's coming up that you, of course, plan for responsibly, you're somebody who just got started with a very low credit limit on one of your cards and you just can't help but almost max it out every month because of that, or you're just one of those folks who wants a higher credit limit for no good reason really, which is not something I necessarily recommend, then you are somebody who needs a credit limit increase. In this video, we're going to be covering what a credit limit increase is, how to get a credit limit increase so you can raise your limit drastically. We'll cover some of the pros and cons of getting a credit limit increase, and then I'll answer a few of the most frequently asked questions, which was left by one of my subscribers. Right off the bat, let's go ahead and just lay the foundation for the rest of this video by talking about what a credit limit increase actually is. But before we even get to that part, we should probably cover what a credit limit is in the first place. When it comes to credit cards in particular, a credit limit is basically just the maximum amount of money that you can put on a credit card. Those credit limits are given to you from a lender based on the amount of money that they are willing to extend to you. While you may not think that a credit limit is very important necessarily, it can actually largely dictate how good or bad your credit score is. There are many different factors that come into play as to what credit limit a lender will give you, but let's really quickly talk about some of the important factors that they consider when giving you a credit limit. That way, if you are somebody that wants to request a credit limit increase down the line, you have a better understanding of why they may or may not approve you. For starters, of course, your previous credit history on other cards that you may have is going to play a really large role. This is because the longer the track record you have of being able to use your credit cards or credit limits responsibly, the better your odds are of getting approved for a higher credit limit. Just think about it from the lender's perspective for a second. If you were a lender and you saw somebody come to you requesting for a new credit line or just a credit limit increase, but that person has really bad credit history and either hasn't made payments in the past or has been maxing out their credit cards and not paying them off, stuff like that, of course, you're going to be pretty hesitant in giving them any kind of credit line going forward. On top of your previous credit history, they of course also care about your income as well. Bottom line is the higher the income you have, the higher the credit limit you'll likely get, mainly because they are not so scared about you not being able to pay off your credit card bills if you do have a higher income. And on the flip side of that, if you have a really low income, they're not going to want to extend you a really high credit limit in fear that you might actually just not make the payment. While they do make money on you paying them interest and stuff like that, if you never pay those bills off, then they are definitely losing money and they don't want to go through the hassle of that, because at the end of the day, that is their money that they are extending to you in the form of a credit card loan technically. So in reality, they want to see you with a higher income rather than a lower one. I will note too that on top of the two factors we just touched on, certain credit cards have specific minimum credit limits that they have to abide by. This does mainly only apply to annual fee cards and they won't really affect the no annual fee cards that much, but I just wanted to point it out. The two main types of cards that you'll see with a minimum credit limit are going to be Visa Signature and Visa Infinite cards. Visa Signature cards have a minimum limit of $5,000 and Visa Infinite cards have a minimum credit limit of $10,000. So an example of a Visa Signature would be the Chase Sapphire Preferred, which has a minimum credit limit of $5,000, and a Visa Infinite card would be something like the Capital One Venture X, which has a minimum limit of $10,000. On a slightly different note, there are two types of credit cards that don't really abide by these credit limit rules at all. Those two types of cards being secured cards and charge cards. As for a secured card in particular, your credit limit is determined by an initial deposit you put down on the card whenever you apply for it. First of all, secured credit cards are mainly for people who either don't have credit history or are trying to rebuild their credit history. So the reason they make you put the deposit down is just in case you never paid off your credit card bill. At least they have that initial deposit that they can keep as collateral in case you don't make those payments ever. However, once you do graduate that card up or product change that card up to an unsecured card, you will get that deposit back and will be given an actual credit limit. On the other hand, charge cards are completely different as well. Charge cards are basically credit cards that have no preset spending limit, and a big example of those types of cards are Amex's charge cards, being the Amex Green, Amex Gold, and Amex Platinum cards. However, contrary to what you may think, these cards do not have an unlimited credit limit on them. There is still a cap on what you can put on these cards, but generally that cap is going to be a lot higher than a normal credit limit would be on another card. One of the main things about charge cards that's interesting is that they actually don't report your credit utilization to the credit bureaus, which can be played to your advantage a little bit if you're responsible with it, but at the same time, for actually building your credit score, that does kind of suck a little bit. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of what a credit limit is, and from that I hope you can kind of gather what a credit limit increase would be. But basically what it is just an increase to that initial credit limit you were given on a card. So instead of boring you with more definitions, let's go ahead and talk about how you can get a credit limit increase. But before we talk about how you can actually get a credit limit increase, I want to tell you all about an app that I personally use to keep track of my total overall credit utilization as well as my total overall credit limits across my cards. The app that I'm talking about is of course Max Rewards. Now yes, Max Rewards is a sponsor of the channel, but I am being completely honest in saying that I've used their app for far longer than they actually have been a sponsor sponsor of the channel. And the reason for that is because Max Rewards allows me to pool all of my credit card information, even if those credit cards come from a multitude of lenders, all into one convenient app. So like I just said, you can see your total credit utilization, your total overall credit limits, your total card balances, point balances, as well as your credit card bill due dates across all of your cards. So even at just a very quick glance, I can tell how my credit profile is looking to a lender before I want to apply for another card, for example. Max Rewards also has a paid tier called Max Rewards Gold that will not only just activate your quarterly rotating categories on cards like your Chase Freedom Flex, but it will also automatically activate all of your credit card offers for you. This really is an app that I use, and I think it's a super powerful tool. So even if you just want to try out the free features of the app, be sure to use the download link in my description to do so. And whenever you sign up for the app and are prompted for a promo code, please use my code Spencer in order to get you 1 free month of Max Rewards Gold. Thank you so much to Max Rewards for sponsoring this video, but now I'll go ahead and tell you how you can get a credit limit increase. There are 4 main ways that you can get a credit limit increase on one of your cards. You can either manually request one from the lender, you can wait for an automatic credit limit increase from your lender. If it's a secured card, you can add more money to that initial deposit to raise your credit limit on that card, or you could actually just apply for a new credit card altogether. Which option you choose is going to completely depend on what type of card you have, but also what your goals are with that credit limit increase. It's also important to note that credit limit increases can actually give you hard pulls for requesting them. This generally only applies whenever you're manually requesting a credit limit increase yourself. If you're getting an automatic one from your lender, they should only ever do a soft inquiry on your credit report. But I just wanted to let you know that to make sure you do your own research first, but also so that you don't just request these like crazy. Let's break down each of those options a little bit more though, so you can see just exactly how to do it. As for the first option, where you manually request the credit limit increase, first of all, this option is best for unsecured credit cards, of course, that you have been using responsibly for at least a few months. And make sure you remember what I just said previously about the fact that these manual credit limit increase requests could actually cause a hard pull to be done on your credit report. Of course, they don't all do that, so that's why I think it's important that you do your own research, but it is something to keep in mind. If this is the route you choose to go though, all you really have to do is log into your lender's website or app or whatever and find the place where you can manually request a credit limit increase. Then all you have to do is generally answer a few questions about your income, your expenses, and also give them a desired credit limit, and then you just submit your credit limit increase request. Then at that point, they will either approve, deny, or counter your request. So once you get to that point, obviously you can take it from there. I know a lot of y'all may be wondering how much you should actually request on a credit limit increase request from a lender. In reality, once again, it just depends on the card that you're requesting the increase on. For example, I know a lot of folks that when it comes to Amex credit cards will tell you to at least request 3 times your initial credit limit on that card, and a lot of folks will get approved for that request. You could implement the exact same strategy with other lenders, but I'm not exactly going to sit here and tell you that it's going to work out perfectly for you. I would just hate for you to request a credit limit increase, especially if it was one that gave you a hard pull, and then get automatically denied because you requested for too much money, rather than you just asking for a realistic number that would actually help you towards your goals. I think it's really smart to go in with a number in mind, or there's really no reason for you to be requesting the credit limit increase in general. I will say though that it's probably best to overshoot the request rather than undershoot it, just based on what we've seen from people's experiences. I actually implemented this method myself with my Citi Custom Cash card, which by the way was only a soft pull and took me like 5 minutes maybe to do. And I did actually make a full video on that process if you want to watch that one after this one. We are going to talk more about that experience here in a little bit too though, so watch out for that. Method number 2 that we mentioned earlier was just waiting for an automatic credit limit increase. Of course, this is going to be the easiest method of all because you genuinely just don't have to do anything. Granted, in order to actually receive an automatic credit limit increase, you need to be using your cards responsibly and also actually using them. And by the way, what I mean by being responsible with your credit cards is paying them off on time in full every single month, not overspending on them, and just showing the lender that you're a trustworthy customer. From what I've read though, these automatic credit limit increases are kind of evaluated on a monthly or so basis, usually starting after you've had the card open for like 5 or 6 months or so. On this topic, I've heard of people who will try to kind of game the system by putting a lot of spend on certain credit cards that they want automatic credit limit increases on. For me personally, I just don't want to sacrifice my credit score for the sake of a credit limit increase, so I don't ever get anywhere near maxing out my cards. But I have seen people implement similar strategies to this, and it does work in getting them automatic credit limit increases. I just want to warn y'all that you need to be careful with this. This option in general though of just waiting for an automatic credit limit increase is obviously not one that you can count on, but it's definitely one that's a happy surprise whenever you get one. And I do believe that I actually got one on my Chase Freedom Unlimited a while back. And the nice thing about these two is that they should never do a hard inquiry on your report for doing it. So it really is just a very passive approach to the credit card game. Method number 3 related back to secured credit cards, and the way that you get a credit limit increase on those is by adding to your initial deposit that was on that card. Of course, the reason this option is different from all the other options for unsecured credit cards is because with a secured card, you are putting the money up front as collateral, but for a normal unsecured card, you're messing with the bank's money. If you did have a secured card and wanted a credit limit increase on it without adding to that initial deposit, you could always try to product change or upgrade this card to an unsecured card, because in that case, you'd be extended an actual credit limit from the credit card lender. And then from then on, you could implement these other strategies we're talking about. Option number 4 is honestly probably the easiest and the quickest method to rapidly increasing your credit limits, and that's going to be by adding a new credit card to your setup. While yes, you can manually request a credit limit increase or just wait for an automatic one to come onto one of your existing cards, you could just as easily go out and fill out an application for a brand new credit card that has a higher credit limit. In general, I would say that adding a new credit card to your setup is going to give you a higher overall credit limit increase than an actual request for a credit limit increase on an existing card would. For example, if you applied for a card, you might get a $5,000 credit limit, but if you request a credit limit increase, you may get like a $2,000 credit limit increase. So if you're somebody that's trying to get your credit utilization down quickly, this could be one good method to do so. And also, of course, you could implement this method alongside requesting a credit limit increase on one of your existing cards, but just realize that a lot of times when you apply for a new card, you're going to be getting a hard inquiry on your report. So if you also get a hard inquiry for that credit limit increase request, then you just need to make sure that you're managing those and understand what that could do to your credit score. On top of just adding to your total overall credit limit by adding a new credit card to your setup, you're also, of course, getting a lot more benefits when you add a new credit card, like just new perks and benefits in general, a new welcome bonus, new earning categories and stuff like that. So it's honestly a method that I would recommend you look into. Now that we've covered what a credit limit increase is and how you can actually request one, let's go ahead and talk about some of the pros and cons of doing so. Starting with the pros, the main pro of this entire thing, in my opinion, is that it lowers your overall credit utilization. The reason I say I think it's the best reason for getting a credit limit increase is because credit utilization makes up 30% of your credit score. And in order to make that factor look good to lenders, you want to have a low credit utilization compared to a higher one. So obviously that's a big benefit in favor of credit limit increases, because the more total overall credit you have, the lower your overall utilization. I should mention here though that your credit limit is calculated on both a per card basis as well as an overall basis. So if you implemented that last method we talked about where you add a new credit card to add to your total overall credit limit, while that will help your overall credit utilization, it will not necessarily help on a per card basis, particularly if you don't also request a credit limit increase on your existing cards with high utilizations on them, or don't shift some of that spend from your higher utilized cards to this brand new card. No matter what though, having a lower utilization is always better for your credit score, so of course this is a massive perk of requesting a credit limit increase. The next and most obvious pro of getting a credit limit increase is the fact that you now have more spending power. This can of course be a really big blessing for some people who have a big purchase coming up soon that they've responsibly planned for, of course, but at the same time it can be extremely dangerous, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Another more intangible pro for requesting a credit limit increase is that it has generally a minimal impact to your credit score. Like I said before, when it came to my Citi Custom Cash, there are a lot of cards out there that will only put a soft inquiry on your credit report for giving you a credit limit increase. So these could have very little downsides to your credit score, but very big upsides, especially if your total overall credit utilization goes down. In some cases, you will get a hard pull for requesting one of these though, but even then, it's really not that big of a deal. Hard inquiries do completely fall off of your credit report after 2 years, and they technically don't impact your credit score at all after 1 year. But to be honest, if you're responsible with your credit cards, that 10-point or less ding that happens because of that hard inquiry will usually be recovered within a couple of months if you just pay off your bills on time and in full and keep that utilization low. But ultimately, if you use the higher credit limit that you've been given responsibly, that new credit limit is going to lead to new credit score gains. As you've heard me say before on my channel, it can't always be sunshines and rainbows, so let's go ahead and talk about some of the cons of requesting one of these credit limit increases. For one, a higher credit limit gives you more access to debt. So if you aren't responsible with your credit cards and can't manage that debt effectively, then this could be really detrimental to you. As y'all probably know, the debt crisis in the US is insane right now. And actually, Mark Plymale and I recently discussed this on our Business Banter podcast channel, if you want to hear more about this. But the reality is that as Americans, a lot of us are really bad at not overspending. So of course, there is a massive danger with getting a credit limit increase request if you already are an overspender. If you don't use your new credit limit responsibly, it could legitimately ruin your finances. So of course, you need to be careful with them, and if you are an overspender, I would not recommend that you request a credit limit increase at all. And matter of fact, I wouldn't even recommend that you have a credit card in the first place, because that is a big issue in America right now. On top of that though, another con to credit limit increases is that they do kind of inhibit you in getting more credit limits down the line. Once again, as I've kind of mentioned a few times in this video, as a credit card lender, you only want to really extend somebody a certain amount of credit limit compared to their income. So if you already have a really high overall credit limit across all of your cards, then a lender might see that and not really want to extend you anymore. In fact, this is exactly why I recommend that people hold off on requesting credit limit increases with Chase. That's because Chase is a lender that does not limit you on the total amount of credit cards you can have with them, but they do limit you on the total amount of credit limit you can have with them. But if you are somebody that's already requested a ton of credit limit increases on your cards with Chase or with any other lender in general, and the total amount of debt that they've extended to you is more than they're comfortable with, they're not going to give you any more, and they may just automatically deny you for that card. You can call the reconsideration line and talk to them about moving a credit limit from an existing card to this new card so you can't open it. But I say all of this because I feel like a lot of folks out there just like seeing the high credit limit number on all of their cards, which to me, I personally just don't understand, and I don't think you should be doing that. But I just want you to realize that there are consequences for doing this without good reason. Now let's go ahead and dive into 5 frequently asked questions that were left by one of my subscribers named Jacob. And the first one he asked is, how often should you request a credit limit increase? And I guess technically you could request a credit limit increase whenever you want. However, I would recommend spacing those out at least a few months, maybe 4 to 6 months. And your chances of being approved for one for a brand new card are a lot higher if you wait past that like 6-month period of having that card. There are of course exceptions to this rule. There are certain cards that you can do within 90 days, within 60 days and stuff like that. But to me, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you request them super frequently or anything, and only ever request them when you actually need a credit limit increase on a card. His second question was basically, how do you know what card to request a credit limit increase on? For me, I think the only really good reason for requesting a credit limit increase manually is if you have a card that you're struggling to keep a low utilization on naturally. So for me, I did it for my City Custom Cash because I was having a hard time keeping my utilization where I wanted to without making early payments to my card. I'm somebody that likes to keep my credit utilization at 1 to 2% every single month. And since I knew that with the City Custom Cash, I could get a credit limit increase with only a soft pull, I figured I might as well go for it. For reference though, this card is my gas card, and I think it started with a $3,000 credit limit on it. And while I'm only putting maybe like $200 per month for gas on my card, that made my individual card utilization about 7%, which is obviously higher than what I'm targeting. At the same time, a 7% utilization is not bad by any means, and it's honestly really good. But I like to keep my utilization as close to 0% as possible without actually being 0% on my statement close date. So for me, I wanted to take any extra percentage points I could get to lower my effective utilization. The third question he asked is, are annual fee cards more likely or less likely to give you a credit limit increase than no annual fee cards? I'm not honestly 100% sure on this one, but thinking through it once again from the lender's perspective, I would imagine they're slightly less likely to give you a credit limit increase on a high annual fee card. The reason I say that is because a lot of annual fee cards do have those minimum credit limits that we talked about previously. So if they're already giving you a really high limit on the card and you're not getting anywhere close to maxing it out by any means, then why would they give you a credit limit increase on it? However, honestly, I don't think there's a massive difference in the likelihood between getting one on an annual fee card and no annual fee card, but if y'all have data points about that, go ahead and leave those in the comments. The fourth question was, how often should you update your income, and is there such a thing of updating that too frequently or not enough? For those of y'all who don't know what he's talking about here, there's basically a way in I think every lender's app and website where you can actually update your income in their system. So as for how often I think you should do it, I'd only ever do it if I had a positive change in my income. This is something that is not required though by the lenders unless you're actually filling out a credit card application or a credit limit increase request. So I wouldn't stress about it too much. And then his fifth question was related to that fourth question, where he asked, what happens if you ignore updating your income intentionally, and does that affect your credit limit worthiness? So as I just said, you are not required to update your income in their systems. It's a completely voluntary thing, but I think there is good reason to update it. For example, if you don't keep it updated but your income is rising steadily, you're really just hurting your odds at getting approved for an automatic credit limit increase. Remember, like we said earlier, they're checking your worthiness for a credit limit increase pretty frequently. So if you do keep increasing your income and you want to update that in their systems, there's a higher likelihood that they'll give you an automatic credit limit increase. I hope me answering his questions helped a lot of y'all out there as well, and I kind of like being able to, answer those live for y'all. But if this kind of credit card 101 type of video was of interest to you, I'd recommend that you go ahead and check out this playlist that I made on the credit card tips that I have for folks, because in that playlist there are a lot of other videos just like this one. And in that playlist, I recently made a video about how you can get a retention offer on all of your cards, which basically just means free points on a yearly or semi-annual basis. So if you want to watch that specific video, you can go ahead and click here. Well, I guess Odin doesn't want to get up for this video and he's sleeping right here in my bed, but if you did enjoy this one, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel, and we'll catch you guys next time.